that way I can share it with anyone. If Jordan's having connection issues, again, he can watch this a little bit later. So, all right. So you probably have all met Megan Yamanishi, the social science librarian at Cornell College, hopefully here or there or anywhere, as the case might be. So I'm just going to kind of let you take it away, Megan, and talk a little bit about searching for economic literature and the resources that the library has.
Great. So how many of you have written lit reviews in the past? A couple of you? Okay. So I guess I'll start with, do you have questions about the lit review that you want to ask me as a librarian? And as we go along, feel free to jump in with any questions. All right, so we'll just jump into it. So for this assignment, you need to find scholarly articles and or a book. Is that right, Todd?
Right.
So where are you going to go to find a book? Where would you guess? Where are the books?
The library?
Yes, the library. Okay, so I will give you fair warning. So my training before I became a librarian, I have a law degree. I teach, actually I teach, I'm gonna be teaching one of the ECB, the employment law class in the spring. So I have a tendency to do a lot of Socratic teaching. So I'll be asking a lot of questions and just waiting for one of you to answer my questions. So just fair warning. Okay, so yes, the library, but the library is, how many of you are off campus at the moment? Most of you, half of you are off campus at the moment. All right, so you can't physically go to the library. So instead of physically going to the library, you're gonna go to where? If you can't physically go to the library, what can you do?
Go to the online?
Yeah. So the library has a web page. Do you all know how to get to the library's homepage? Okay. So actually, I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. Let me make this bigger so that I can still see you all. All right, so any page, if you're on the student portal, there's a big library button, but any page at Cornell, if you go down to the bottom to the giant purple bar, there's always a link to the library. So if you can get to any Cornell webpage, you can get to our page. If you wanted to find just a book, where would you go on here? Can you see this page?
The catalog?
Yeah, so the library's catalog is where you can find all of the books. Now this is actually not just our catalog. We have, I don't know, I'm just gonna type in something super broad. This it used to be branded really obviously, but it isn't at the moment. This is our catalog is part of WorldCat, which is short for World Catalog, which means that it's searching our stuff, and if it knows that you are a Cornell student, so if you sign in through Cornell's website, our stuff floats to the top of the search results, but it's also searching libraries all around the world. So it will find things in libraries all over the place. As I said, the default here, over here, you can see sort by library. The default is for the stuff that we own to come to the top of the results list. If you aren't seeing anything, if you have a much more specific search than just economics, you may not see that we have very much stuff, so you can switch over to best match, and then it'll show you things from any library that are in here. Because many of these things we can get for you. Now, if you are off campus, it becomes trickier. If you're on campus, we can physically request the items. The other library will mail us the book, and you can come and pick it up in the library. If you're off campus, we really can't do that because the book still belongs to the other library, and so like having it mailed multiple times, it just becomes too dangerous risky in terms of losing the book. A lot of these are ebooks though. We actually have, the library has probably at least 3 times as many ebooks as physical books now. And so you'll see that these links here that you can just go directly and view the books. Now, so this is the other thing. There are even more ebooks available right now than there have been in the past. Because actually this one says we own the print book, but you can get the ebook through HathiTrust. So there are a couple of different organizations that have been digitizing books for like the past 10 or 15 years with the idea of just creating this sort of archive, dark archive of books. Because of the pandemic, a lot of those are now, they've made them available to look at online. So that's very handy. We have way more ebooks available through the catalog today than we did a year ago. They might not still be available a year from now because they're technically violating copyright law. So as soon as the crisis is over, I think they'll go back to not having them be available unless they're out of copyright. This one is probably out of copyright since the author died, since it was published. Yeah, it was published in 1895. So this one's out of copyright. All right, but that's not one of ours. Let me show you one that's actually one of ours. I probably need something more specific than economics. Okay, so Global Poverty and Wealth Inequality. This is an actual ebook that we own the ebook. So you'll need to sign in, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So you come in here and it shows you the contents. You can either use the contents to navigate or you can pull up the PDF directly. So if you wanted to look at this. And then it's slow, but you can look at it this way. There are ways to download these ebooks. It's kind of a pain in the neck, and it doesn't make it so that you can like read it on your Nook or anything. It's still the same clunky interface. So unless you need, and you have to have like a separate account with some other third-party security people. So unless you need to be offline for some reason, I would recommend just reading these online. That's the easiest way. But this does mean that you should all be able to find books that you can access whether you are on campus or off campus. Okay. So that's books and articles.
Would it be okay if I just added a couple other things about books?
Yeah.
First off, I have quite a decent library in my office. Now, I'm not teaching in person, so I have not been at my office, but this is one of the things we can talk about. I'm going to be meeting with the students individually, but some of these books that they might run across, I do have copies of, and we can maybe figure out a way to get you a copy of a book. I also do think it's worth looking on Amazon for books that, you know, a lot of these books you can get in paperback for relatively small amounts or get ebooks. And so, you know, it might be worth 15 or 20 bucks not to have to wait, given the condensed time that we're in. Even if it's available on ILL, it might be worth 15 or 20 bucks to just buy the book and get it in a day or a day and a half instead of, I mean, usually, I think you're right. You guys do a great job with ILL, but still sometimes it can be 3, 4, 5 days, and then that's really getting to the point where it may not be useful.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's true. And the other piece with this is, you know, if you're not physically on campus and it's one of our print books that you're interested in, like if it was this one, we will mail those to you, but that takes time.
Right.
So, you know, if you find it today and you tell us today that you need it, it might get there in time for the assignment, but not always.
Yeah.
So, but it's always worth asking to see how long it's going to take before you spend your own money. The other piece is if you're not here in Mount Vernon. When you look at these and find them in a different library, you can tell it what zip code you're in. And so see where it says held by other libraries. If you go into this record, it will show you where they are and how far away they are from you. So it's possible if you're somewhere not here, but with lots of libraries around you, that you could find books in your local libraries that you could just physically go and check out, or whatever system they have for checking out books. So this is not a particularly common one, but let's see. Some of them are all over the world. So yeah, you can see this one is many, many places. So I'm searching for my location, but like, I don't know, let's say I was in Chicago. So it's finding this book in 2 different libraries that are within 10 miles of Chicago. Okay. So that could be a tool also if you're far away from us. But you would need to go, like, make sure that they would lend the book to you directly rather than having it go through interlibrary loan. Okay. And where, I'm gonna go back to here. Okay, so this is books. What about articles? Where would you look for articles?
You can use EBSCO.
Yeah, okay, so what is EBSCO?
It's a collection of various types of articles from different journals.
Yeah, so it's a database of mostly scholarly stuff. So EBSCO itself is not actually a database, you probably are, but they have a database called Academic Search Complete, or sometimes Academic Search Elite or Supreme, or they've got a bunch of different levels of it, which commonly is called EBSCO. And so this is a collection of scholarly stuff. We have a bunch of different databases, which are all collected under our e-resources. To make things a little easier for you all, I've created a course guide for you. So if you're on the library page and you click on this course guides tab, find your class, click the invisible go button. And there are a bunch of databases here that I've sort of curated for you. So Academic Search Complete, that's the EBSCO big broad one. That's a good general database. For you all, because you are taking an econ seminar, I would suggest starting in one of the econ specific databases that we have, so that you know that you're getting articles that are more through an economic lens, looking at things, you know, doing research the way economists do research. So we have 2 of those. One of them is Business Source Elite, and this is an EBSCO database. So if you've used another EBSCO database, so Academic Search Complete or PsycInfo or SocialIndex or one of those, it's going to look really familiar because they put their own skin on everything. So we can look in here and so if we do just poverty without anything else, we get almost 30,000 results. This is just looking for the word poverty anywhere in the article. So one of the things that's nice about databases compared to like a Google search or something like that is that everything that's in here has what librarians call metadata attached to it, which is information about the information. So you can narrow your search down by a bunch of different categories of information. So we can narrow it by date. You probably don't need the 1889 articles. Todd, do they have any requirements for how old their stuff can be?
Not really. You know, obviously, the more empirical your paper is, the more recent you would like it to be, right? But then I think there's also, you know, it's possible that people are picking topics more related to economic history or the philosophy or theory, in which you could potentially go back to the 50s or 60s. So, I think it just kind of depends. That's one of the things, you know, all of you can come talk with me about. If you're worried that an article is too old, you should reach out to me and we can think about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe start by casting a pretty broad net. We'll go back to just 1950 for now, and then narrow it down more if you want to. These databases are mostly scholarly stuff, but there's some more like popular stuff. So you want to probably narrow it down to just the academic journal articles. I don't know, would trade publications work for this? Probably best to stick with academic.
I think it's probably best to stick with academic. Yeah. I mean, I would say so for this. I mean, there's a possibility that there possibly would be something in a trade or even a magazine, but I think in general, your time's probably best spent looking into journal articles.
Yeah. So you can narrow it down that way. And then the other piece over here that's really nice is there's this subject thesaurus term and subject. And these are, do you all know what keywords are that are attached to articles sometimes? You'll read like there's an abstract and then there's a list of words right under that are the keywords. Yeah, some of you are nodding. So Chase, what are keywords?
Sorry. Keywords are different topics that the author believes that their paper is especially relevant to.
Yeah, exactly. And so the subject thesaurus term is sort of the same idea, but theoretically standardized across the database. So in other words, if one author says poverty and another author says poor people or something like that, they would get the same subject term applied in the database. And so you can narrow it down that way over here. So if you're especially interested in sustainable development, for example, then you could narrow it down to articles that have the word poverty somewhere in them, and also as one of their subjects have sustainable development as a subject. Okay. So you can always add more terms up here. As you are searching, when you find an article, if you find one article that you like, you can often use that article to find other articles. How would you do that? How do you think that would work?
Usually like at the bottom of the article, they have like they cite like their sources that they use and stuff like that. So you can kind of like look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go into the article and scroll down to the end where they've got all of their references. And then you can look at these and see, so these are the sources that this author or these authors were relying on when they were writing this paper. So they're related in some way to the article you already have. So look at those. These are all going to be articles that were written earlier than the one that you're looking at, because there's the arrow of entropic time only goes in one direction, right? So you can't cite something that hasn't been written yet. If you want to go the other direction and see, has anybody cited this article, there's a way to do that, which actually, this is the one time when I really especially love Google Scholar. How many of you have used Google Scholar? Yeah, okay. So I don't typically, for a fairly narrow topic, I prefer to start in a database if I can, just because I know what kinds of sources I'm gonna get. Whereas if I start in Google Scholar, it scoops up such a wide range of stuff, and I don't have those same like tools to narrow things down. If I'm starting with a really interdisciplinary topic, then I'll start in Google Scholar sometimes. But what Google Scholar especially shines at is this piece of research, which is you can plug an article that you find somewhere else into Google Scholar, and then it has this feature down here, cited by, because it's got access to like every electronic scholarly thing out there, it pulls out all of the ones that mention this article. And you'll see that's a link, so you can click on it. And now you've got the search results. These are all of those articles. So now this is the same thing as looking at references. This is like the inverse of looking at the references. So now we're looking at more recent stuff that's related in some way to that first article that you found. It has this checkbox. 29 isn't that many, but like, Todd, is there some book that's a really influential book in this topic?
You could, for instance, type Solow 1956. What is it? A contribution to the theory of economic growth. I think it was 56, 57.
So this one has been cited
Yeah.
33,000 times. All right. If you have 20 results or 8 results or something like that, you can just look at them all. Obviously, if you've got 33,000 results, you don't want to have to, nobody's ever going to be able to page through that many pages of Google results. That's where this search within citing articles comes in really handy, because now we can look at which ones talk about sustainable development, for example. Okay, so now we're down to, how many is this? 4,000. We've narrowed it down from 33,000 to 4,000 that talk about sustainable development. And you can continue to do this, run basically Google searches with Google's secret magic algorithms, but just on things that are citing that source that you found interesting to start with. Okay. And so if you use both of these techniques, going back and forth, looking at the references and then looking at the citing articles, you can very quickly sort of build up a body of scholarship that's all sort of talking to each other about a topic. Now you don't want to only do that, just in case sometimes there are parallel conversations happening around your topic. And so if for some reason there are 2 different schools of thought that aren't citing each other, you won't find them both this way. But if there is one coherent conversation, it'll show up this way. The most common time that happens is when a topic is interdisciplinary. And so like the political scientists aren't talking to the economists, vice versa.
Right. But I do think that this, using Google Scholar, this is a very useful way of identifying papers, because definitely one form that your literature review can take is, here's the question, these people say this, these people say no, it's this, right? Which is a lot of the research in this area, is that people come to different conclusions by using different data sets or tweaking their models or things like that. So it's a real interesting way to identify papers that don't necessarily agree, which actually make for good literature reviews.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. In Google Scholar, to see the actual text of the article, if they're available, use these links here on the side. These are links to full text for free. If you click on one of these, it is very likely that it's going to ask you to pay money to read the article. Don't do that. If you don't have an article over here, then we can get the articles for you through interlibrary loan. And whereas books, like physical books, take a while to get places because they have to be physically mailed, articles come really fast. Like 2 business days is what I usually tell people, but I've seen them come as fast as like put the request in the morning and the article's there in the afternoon, because it's all electronic now. It's all just like download and push a button. So, but don't pay, never pay for these. And you can set up over here, my library. And no, that's not it. Somewhere in here, you want it to know that you want to search Cole Library, because then it will connect you theoretically to, if we subscribe to the journal, it'll give you the link to our subscription. If you can't figure out how to get that working, you can always, the other thing is you can always plug this into WorldCat, and usually it'll come up there. So, because you can find, this is the same catalog that we looked at for books, it also searches most of our databases. Not most of, a lot of our databases. And so, no, didn't find that one though. Let's see, let's try this one that I know we have. Yeah, so it'll pop up here and then you can just view it that way if we own it. So the free things over here, some of these are journals that are open access. Some of them are like the author just posted it on their own website or something like that. Sometimes it's like the preprint version of the article, which is usually okay. It's just like the page numbering might be different than what's in the official journal, but the content is the same. And sometimes it's that it's figured out that it's something that we own and it's linking you that way. All right,
And
other
also-
things on.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Megan. Also, a lot of papers before they're published are actually issued in working paper form. So, and then many times the working paper is what's available on PDF. And as far as I'm concerned, working papers are perfectly acceptable, right? So if you can find the paper in a working paper form, by all means.
Yeah. If you're having trouble finding the article in full text, you can always email me and I will help you look for it or help you do interlibrary loan. There are instructions in here for interlibrary loan. And the other piece that I wanted to show you, so getting started, the sign-in for interlibrary loan and the sign-in for all of our databases is different from the sign-in for everything else at Cornell. So your user ID is actually your student ID number on your library or on your student ID card. And then the password is whatever password you set up. If you haven't already done this, you'll need to assign a password. It's really easy. These are the directions. And the same, once you've set up the password, it works for everything. So it'll work for the database articles, it'll work for interlibrary loan. If you check out a book and you need to renew it, you can do that with that same password, all of those kinds of things, okay? So for sure, if you haven't already done it, then do this like first thing before you, because it'll just make all of your other stuff easier. If you're on campus, you won't, other than interlibrary loan, I don't think you'll need to log in for anything because it'll know from your IP address that you're on campus. So you can download articles and that kind of thing without signing in. But if you're off campus, you'll need this login. Okay, so there are the other econ specific database that we have is one of our Gale databases. And I want to show you this one. It works very similarly to the EBSCO database. The one thing that's different, search. One thing that's different is that the EBSCO databases default to showing you everything in the database, which includes usually scholarly, trade, magazine stuff. The Gale one, I can get it to go, defaults to showing you only the magazine stuff, not the scholarly stuff. So you want to always switch over to academic journals when you first run the search. And the other thing is that its filters are on the right instead of on the left. But otherwise it works really, you know, once you start to get comfortable with databases, you'll see that they look a little different, but they all work kind of the same. And you actually probably are already familiar with databases, like if you've ever shopped online. Any of you ever used Amazon? That's a ginormous database. So same kind of idea. But the particular filters that are available are different depending on what's in the database. So same thing, you would click in here to read the article. And there's the article. Oops. And also, what is this? This one has some of its actual data. Oh, so this is a table. The one thing that I like about EBSCO is that a lot of the articles in there are in PDF. whereas more of these are just HTML, which means that the tables are not usually quite as, they get reformatted, and so they're not as pretty. And they may not show up in the place in the article that they did originally. So, okay, back over here. The other thing that's on this course page for you, oh, so those are the two econ specific databases. If for some reason you aren't finding stuff in there, I think you should all be able to find stuff in those two databases. But there are a few other things. There's a link to the catalog here. There's a link to Google Scholar down here at the bottom. In between are some other databases that have different focuses. So the general databases, this is like EBSCO Academic Search Complete. So if your topic for some reason isn't covered in one of the econ databases, you could try one of these. And then there are also a few subject and topic specific databases that are in here, depending on whether your particular subject is overlapping. I would start for sure in the econ ones because those are the articles that are, as I said, written with an econ lens. But you might want to see, you know, what are the political scientists thinking about this, because development and poverty and wealth are topics that are really interesting to them. I included a couple of really, so Nexus Uni, this is our legal database, but also a business database. This one has the steepest learning curve of probably any database here. So, but it also has more stuff in it than any other database that we have probably. So if you happen to want a legal perspective, or if you want to get into some like specific company stuff, this would be a one to look at, but ask me about it because it's hard to use. Political Science Complete, SocIndex has lots of sociology. So that's why I included those two, because they tend to talk about some of the particular factors that you might be interested in. And then Gender Studies and War and Terrorism, just because those are two topics that have a huge impact on poverty and wealth. So, okay. Then down at the bottom is information about citation tools. How many of you are using a citation manager, like Zotero or Mendeley or RefWorks? Just Chase? Chase, which one do you use?
I use Zotero.
Okay, do you want to talk about that at all? Like what it is?
Yeah, sure. So Zotero's a program that runs on your computer and also in your browser. It's a browser extension as well. Whenever you find a article or a web page, I even kind of use it now just to save web pages. You can then click the little button up in your web browser and it'll save it to your computer. But along with that, it also saves all of the citation information on that it scans it and finds all of that. It also allows you to tag it. So, if you have, and manage it by folder. So you could create a folder for the project and put tags like this one's related to poverty, whereas this one's related to something else. It's super helpful. And especially the last big part of it is when you go to write your paper, there's an extension for both Word and Google Docs that will basically automatically generate a full citation based off where you put your in-text citations in your paper. And it can do it for almost any major citation format that I've seen. It's extremely helpful.
Oh, whoops. I guess I can't do it for that. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah. So this is what Chase is talking about. If you're when you're writing your lit review, you would go add a citation. Oh, I have to tell it who I am. And then the one tricky part is, for some reason, the first time you do this, it shows up behind your window, and then you tell it which style. And I think for this assignment, APA or Chicago is what Yeah.
Yeah, I would say
well-
Chicago is the most wide used, but I mean APA would also be fine.
Okay. But Chicago author date, right? Not Chicago note.
Chicago author date.
Yes.
Yes.
So you can tell it which one. If you're in a different class, then maybe you want MLA style. So you tell it which citation style you want. And we got to go back. And then this little tab thing pops up, and you type in whatever you can think of about your article. And then you pick the article. If you want to add page numbers, you can add page numbers. I'm just going to make one
I'll
up.
say for this assignment, economists are not that worried about page numbers. So cite the article, author date, but that's really sufficient.
And then, oops, I gotta pop my.
We're not nearly as picky as the people in the humanities.
Okay, so we'll take out that. And it pops in like that. Let's see. Is it? I don't know why it keeps popping up behind. It should pop up in front, but it's not. You can see this though, right? I shared the whole screen and not just the, yeah, okay. So if I have anything in here about wealth, authors named Smith, lots of authors named Smith. Okay. Okay. Oh, it's very slow. I don't know why it's so slow. And then when you're done and you're ready to write your bibliography or your reference page, whichever, it's called bibliography in Chicago style. Then, let's refresh this. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, you would add the bibliography, and if it, I don't know why it didn't do that, but it automatically adds the bibliography with the sources that you've cited in the paper. Okay. So yes, I highly recommend getting comfortable with one of these types of citation managers. They're great for keeping track of stuff. Just like Chase, I use it for random things. Like I have one for shopping pages and things like that. Because when you're ready to go back, like these are all things that I've pulled up for random classes. But then when you go into it, you click on it, and like I added this one in April, and it opens the article. And it has all of the information that I need. So it's especially nice if you're going to go on, if you're doing a topic that you're interested in and that you might want to research again, you might want to use these sources again. You don't have to try and figure out where did I find that, how, you know, what search was I doing, what database was it in? It's just there for you. Okay, so there's instructions for all of that on your course page. Which I can see if I make this bigger. So down here, Zotero is the one that I was using and that I've been showing. There are some others that are really good. RefWorks is a great one. If you're using a Chromebook, the steps are a little trickier. So just FYI. Okay. There's also instructions on here for, well, not instructions, but links for getting in touch with me. I have an appointment calendar. So if you have questions about any of this, if you want me to walk you through getting Zotero set up on your computer or RefWorks set up on your computer, or you want me to walk you through, if you want to like do a search while I'm watching so that, you know, I can give you tips as you go, anything like that, I'm happy to do that. You can look at my appointment calendar, and it's a Google Calendar. It's these silver pieces here that say advising and research. Just pick one that works for you, and it'll appear on my calendar and it'll appear on your Google Calendar. If there's not a slot that works for you, then just send me an email and we'll set something up. In particular, if you are not in Cornell's time zone, email me and we'll set up an appointment, because sometimes the calendar doesn't work well across different time zones. So, and also if you're in a different time zone, it might be that you would rather meet at 9 o'clock at night or something like that. Okay. Questions about any of this?
I think that was hugely helpful, Megan.
Okay.
And, you know, I think the other thing is, as Megan said, you have Megan, you have me, right? So as opposed to, you know, spending hour and hour spinning your wheels, if you get stuck, or you have this article, or you have this great idea, but you can't find articles, or you have one article, you can't find others, you know, that's why we're here. And the sooner you start looking, the more time that it gives you to pause and say, instead of wasting time, I'm going to reach out to Todd or Megan, and then they'll get back with me eventually, and then I can, you know, pick up and be more productive. So, you know, this weekend is really a great time to begin to look for some things. We're going to have individual meetings on Tuesday, so you have to do it soon, but this weekend is a great time to like get some ideas, bring in a couple of articles that might work, and that way if you get stuck, and then also because of interlibrary loan, right, that the sooner you can identify things you might need, the better. So yeah, I think this should all give you a lot to start with.
Yes. And if you haven't used databases much in the past, if most of your research has been done just with Google, that kind of thing, it'll feel a little awkward and it'll feel slower, because the databases in some ways aren't as smart as Google is at interpreting what you're asking it. But ultimately, you'll get better stuff, better results than if you're doing a Google search, especially vanilla Google versus Google Scholar, because there's a lot less guessing of, is this a scholarly article? Does this count? Is this the kind of thing that my professor is looking for if you start in a scholarly database? But as I said, if you're finding that weird and you're not getting the results that you want, please contact me, and we can brainstorm different search techniques for your specific topic.
I expect that the problem that most of you will have is not too few articles, but too many. That there's just too much out there, and then it becomes a question of like, well, what works best? Is this a good one? Is that, you know? And so, you know, once again, that's where I can be very useful to you, right? About telling you, you know, maybe this one's older, maybe this one's a little newer, maybe this one's in a better journal, right? This one might be a little bit lower level, so maybe more appropriate for us, as opposed to this one that's working through, you know, differential calculus and et cetera. So, yeah.
The great thing about using a citation manager is that you can easily collect all of them in one place, and then when you're talking to your professor about them, it's, you know, you don't have to be like, what he's saying, that I should have one that's a little more recent, and I had one that was a little more recent, but I don't know where I found it. But, you know, if you've collected them into the citation manager, then you can just go to it. So you can even search by the publication dates within your Zotero collection of stuff. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I will share the link. So the link for this page is on, as I said, it's on the Cole Library page. There's the course guides, and then find it this way, but I'll also send the link to Todd. So Todd, you can put it on Moodle or something in case they want a more direct way to get to it.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, it was nice to see you all.
Okay, thanks so much, Megan. This is hugely helpful. Okay, thank you. All right, everyone. So I don't think that there's really anything else to talk about. We're not going to cover any new material. I'll be sending you an email here in a couple of minutes that will have the links to the lecture this morning, and then also to the discussion this afternoon that you have. Tomorrow, what are your responsibilities? You basically have two things to read. The first is chapter 9, but you do not have to read all of chapter 9. I basically want you to read the part on what's called AK model. articles, which is really just the first couple of pages. So you do not have to read everything in chapter 9, just kind of the first couple of pages of chapter 9. And then we're going to talk about an article by Robert Lucas from the year 2000. I will be sending you that article in the email. Okay, so that will come up in a couple of minutes. The point of this Lucas model that we're going to talk about tomorrow is both what the paper talks about, but I also want to talk about how do you go about reading a paper like this, okay? So you might be thinking about that as you go through reading this article, is like, how would I summarize this article, right? Can I pick out what's important out of this? Can I think about what's not so important? Okay, and so I want to kind of talk about that tomorrow. Like, how do you look through an article which, quite honestly, a lot of the articles that you get, you're not going to understand everything in them, right? I mean, these are written by PhD economists. You're not going to understand everything in these articles. But how can I read an article but make sure I get the gist of what's going on, right? And just as important, how can I then communicate that to other people? So that's going to be kind of the eye that we read this article tomorrow, all right? So first give it a try today, tonight. See what you think about that. Our email will be coming as soon as I can upload this video here this afternoon, okay? So that will be tomorrow. Also, first thing in the morning, we're going to have Laura from the Writing Center come and talk a little bit about some of the resources she has to offer as well. So we'll do all that tomorrow, all right? Okay, all right. All have a good afternoon, okay? And Chase, if you want to just stay on for a minute, we can have our meeting. Okay, thanks everyone. Hey, Chase.
Hi. Sorry, I have just a few little questions. I think just to fully get everything aligned. So my first one is related to, so in a steady state or in a balanced growth path, if we decrease something, or so if we decrease, like, say, our investment rate, will the transition to the new steady state or the new balanced growth path slow down as time goes on?
Yes.
Why?
Because of diminishing marginal returns.
Okay.
So, let's think about an example where there's an increase in the savings rate. So our balanced growth path went up, right? When are we farthest away from the balanced growth path? In that first period. So that's where we're going to have the biggest change, is in that first period. But in the next period, we're going to move a little bit closer. And so what's going to be the change in that next period? A little bit smaller, right? And all of that is because of diminishing marginal returns, right? The farther you are away from the balanced growth path, the faster you grow, the bigger the changes. So if you actually think about how this works, it's kind of, what do they call that? Zeno's paradox, right? If there's a wall in front of me and with every step I move halfway there, I never actually get there. Well,
right.
It's kind of the same deal, right? You're moving halfway there. It's the biggest step is the first time. Each step after that is getting smaller, and after a while, they're just getting infinitesimally. I didn't say that right, but extremely small, right? And so that's how it's working.
Okay. So one thing that's kind of been confusing me is since capital per capita is subject to diminishing marginal returns, why does it still continue to grow at the rate of output if we have a technology rate of like 0.2? I guess, why does capital still continue to grow at an increasing rate, if that makes sense? Capital per capita, if it still is subject to diminishing marginal returns.
Okay. You're talking about the model with technology.
Yes.
And so really, one way to think about technology is the way we overcome diminishing marginal returns, right? So if we don't have any technology growth, you're right, diminishing marginal returns is all that matters. And per capita capital slows down to zero growth. In other words, capital will just grow at the rate of labor so that per capita capital stays constant. But how do we overcome diminishing marginal returns? That's the role of technology, right? That's the way we overcome it and force capital to grow continuously, per capita capital to grow continuously and forever, right? So something has to be greater than diminishing marginal returns. And in our model, that's the role of technology.
Got it.
And so that's why we keep on coming up with these conclusions that, you know, what matters the most, technology, right? Because,
Right.
because that's the only way you can really explain growth in the long run,
Okay.
because of diminishing marginal returns.
And then, so if we had a sudden change in our rate of technology or our G,
Mm-hmm.
would that be an instantaneous change in our growth rate, or would it take time to level out, kind of how it does with our other
Yeah,
changes?
so that's a good question. It would be both, right?
Okay.
There would both be a short run effect and a long run effect. And why is that? Because if there was an increase in technology, it's going to incentivize you to accumulate more capital. But it takes time to accumulate more capital. And so that's why you would actually, if there was an increase in G, growth would actually go above that increase in G in the short run and then come back down a little bit to the new higher level of G in the long run. Does that make sense? Would it help if I drew a graph or?
It might help with a graph.
Act together here. Okay, so think about our Solem model. This is actually related to the question you asked in class a little bit, right? Okay, so here we have this. What happens if we have an increase in G? Well, this is the question you asked in class yesterday. You get kind of this unusual counterintuitive graph where this actually goes down and it looks like the balanced growth path has gone down. But in fact, at this balanced growth path, because it's driven by an increase in G, we have faster short run output growth. We have faster per capita output growth, and we'll be richer in the long run. So what would happen here? Let me get some more. So now we have G prime is the rate that we're going to grow in the long run. But because this balanced growth path incentivizes us to get more capital, we'll actually grow faster than G prime, right? If you think about, that's where G prime is. We'll actually grow faster than G prime in the short run, and then we'll come back to this higher level of output growth in the long run. Okay? And once again, why do we grow faster in the short run? because we have to accumulate more capital, because with more productivity, there's now more of a demand for capital. What happens to output growth or what happens to the level of output? This one's a little bit harder to graph, but initially the growth rate is really steep, and then it kind of tails off. But notice that it doesn't go back to the same slope. It has a higher slope now because the growth rate. So I didn't really, that's kind of extreme. If I was a better draftman, I would kind of smooth it out a little bit, but hopefully you get the
Yeah.
gist of what's going on.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool.
And then my last one is, when talking about conditional convergence,
Mhm.
if one of the two countries that, let's say, that we're looking at that have the same balanced growth path, if one of them is already at their balanced growth path, will those two ever converge if like the other one isn't for a while? If that makes sense. I guess my confusion is, how would that one ever catch up if the most it could ever get to is where the other one already is?
Well, that would be catch up, right? To be the same. So
Okay.
listen, this goes back to that Zeno paradox thing. Technically, you're right. No, right? Because you never actually get there, right? If you're only catching up slowly, you never actually catch up. But as a practical matter, yes, right? I mean, given enough time, the incomes in the two countries will essentially be the same. I mean, if you have the same balanced growth path, given enough time, yes, for all practical matters, they will have completely converged. But convergence, just to be clear, convergence doesn't mean that income has to be equal. It means that incomes are getting more equal, right? That's what we refer to as convergence, that incomes are getting closer together. Not that they're exact, but they're getting closer together. And, you know, as we talked about, in general, there's some evidence that that's happening. At least countries that are growing appear to be converging. And then there's this other set of countries that are not growing and also not converging.
Okay. Got it. That makes sense.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, good questions, Chase. You appear to be getting it, so good job.
Thank you very much.
All right, see ya. See you tomorrow.